Good afternoon and welcome in. Tuesday edition of The Drive. No Spence Checketts today. I am Porter Larsen filling in. Of course, Spence will be back next week. It is the dog days of summer, late July here in Salt Lake City, which means, well, we may be stretching for some sports topics, but thanks to some soccer, thanks to some offseason storylines in the NBA, the NFL, and more, we have plenty to get to. Of course, we are within a week from Utah football fall camp. And of course, on game days, as you can hear me on the station each and every week, that's kind of my bread and butter. So we'll talk plenty of Utah football on the show. We'll give you a little preview of fall camp. That will be a theme throughout the week. And we'll get to it. Trey Fitzgerald will stop by the program. We'll get the latest on Real Salt Lake. It's a match day for the Utah Royals, so he'll give us the update there. Tony Parks will stop by the program. Little Salt Lake Bees, a little MLB to Salt Lake City. The odds of that happening and the excitement therein. Dave Fox will stop by the show. We'll go all over the map with Dave. Talk a little Jazz offseason, Utah football, and plenty more. And last but certainly not least, if you listen to the Sean O'Connell show, we were talking a little bit about bell cow backs. Well, we've got one on the show today. He's going to be at least 30 carries. I want at least 30 carries. Give me 200 plus. Give me 3 touchdowns. It's Zach Moss, the greatest running back in the history of the Utah football program. He will stop by the show, and looking forward to chatting with Zach as always. I want to continue a little bit of the conversation I had with Sean O'Connell on the Crosstalk, of course, brought to you by our friends at Advanced Windows, Nate Orchard and Jake Weber, and our friends at Advanced Windows, of course, one of our favorite sponsors here on the show. We were talking a little bit about Utah's roster, and more specifically, their wide receiver room. It is a room that historically for Utah has been by committee. As we talked about, the last 1,000-yard receiver was one Drez Anderson. Darren Carrington got awfully close once upon a time. And I think that drought, if you want to call it that, continues in 2026, 2027. But I don't necessarily think that is a cause for concern. When you look at the Utah roster, they have an interesting dynamic at the wide receiver position. Returning, of course, Larry Simmons, who was their leading receiver last year. Creed Whittemore, more of a possession slot type guy there. Tobias Merriweather, who, has shown a lot of talent, but has legitimately just struggled bringing the ball in. He's really athletic, really good size, kind of a prototype when it comes to the receiver in those roles. But, man, he got himself into position, he got himself open, and then a lot of times just struggled reeling the ball in on passes from Devin Dampier. You've got Dadrian Zipper. You've got Ricky Johnson. You've got Nate Johnson. And then you've got a couple of transfer ins who Utah folks are really excited about. The first one, Braden Pagan out of Utah State, comes here with his offensive coordinator, Kevin McGivern. The most productive of the wide receivers in that room for Bryson Barnes & Co. in 2025. Joins the Utah roster. He is kind of a sure thing, if you ask me. If he's available, if he's out on the field, whoever the quarterback is, whatever the system is, there aren't many questions for me about Braden. I think he's going to be productive for Utah. Kyrie Scholes, who folks are really just as high on, maybe more of a question mark just because he is now entering a system he's never played in. He is playing with a quarterback he's never played with, and, of course, in a wide receiver room in which he is the newest and freshest face in. But all of those guys together, I think, make a pretty dynamic and pretty dangerous room. We got to see it out on the field. There's no doubt about that. We're going to have to see it before we can really give a grade out on this wide receiver room. But I think there are a lot of options and a lot of toys for Devin Dampier to play with. And, of course, as the quarterback position goes, he'll find a couple guys that he's maybe a little more comfortable with. He's got a little bit more rhythm and chemistry with. That'll happen throughout the course of the year, and you'll probably see a little bit of a cream rise to the top with 3, maybe 4 guys at the wide receiver position. But I do think that on a consistent basis, you're going to get 5 or 6 guys catching passes, 5 or 6 guys that are available for Devin Dampier in the wide receiver room. And for that reason, I think you have another year in 2026 in which you don't see a 1,000-yard receiver. The other pass catchers in the tight end room, it's an interesting one as well. Noah Benny, the leading receiver, back in the tight end room. Hunter Andrews, the redshirt sophomore, who I don't know if he's a tight end or a fullback or a running back or all of the above, but he's going to give you some production. The question with him is, what does it look like? We saw him taking snaps last year. We saw him in a bunch of different roles, a lot of times in the backfield, and he was good right up until, of course, he was injured. I think a lot of folks are excited to see a healthy Hunter Andrews and what he can do now in a different offense. Will he be used in as many, let's call them cute ways, as Jason Beck used him in 2025, or will you see more of a traditional tight end fullback type player in Hunter Andrews? That's a question mark as well. Of course, we saw last year, Semi Tuolonga, a literal defensive lineman with ball skills who can catch the ball and run and is a very, very unique weapon that I do think Utah will continue to utilize. You'll see him potentially as a tight end, a fullback as well. So there are plenty of weapons when we're talking about pass catchers for the Utes coming into 2025. It's just a matter of how they're used, what that looks like, and just how many guys Devin Dampier and Kevin McGivern are able to get involved. You also look at the run game. Of course, Wayshawn Parker returning. Daniel Bray, a sophomore who is expected, by all accounts, to be a bigger part of the offense. I haven't even mentioned Nate Johnson, who played quarterback for a minute, was used as a weapon for Utah, transferred to Vanderbilt, now is back in Salt Lake City. You can use him in a multitude of different ways as well. LaMarcus Bell, a kid that there's a lot of excitement about. And then, of course, you have a backfield at the quarterback position with each of Devin Dampier and Bert Ficklin, who both bring you throwing ability and the ability to hurt you with their feet. That's going to be interesting to see how those reps are divided up. And again, when you have all of that taken into account, I think that you're going to see another, for the most part, by committee wide receiver room. And you may see a guy get up into the 700, 800 yards. I just don't think we see anyone cross the century mark. And I don't think that that's necessarily a problem for this Utah football team. Now, the big X factor for all of what I just spent the last 10 minutes mentioning, the big X factor for all of it is the 5 guys up front. The 5 guys up front who are replacing an entire unit, most of which are going to be playing on Sundays. I am curious what that 5 looks like. I think you'll see Zero-Way Williams. I think you'll see Moiai. I think you'll see Alex Harrison. The other 2 spots are maybe more of a question mark. Do you see Isaiah Garcia, Cedric Jefferson, the transfer, Do you see Keith Olson, a redshirt senior who's been there a long time? Does Kelvin Obot, the highly rated recruit, the freshman who has some history and some experience with the offensive line coach Jordan Gross, does he slide into that starting role? Obviously, as the season goes along, you're going to see multiple different five-man units based on availability, based on injury, and the like. But I am really curious when we get to week one, when we get to late in fall camp, once it becomes prep time, right? Opponent prep time rather than tryout time in fall camp. I am very curious and very interested to see which five, if healthy, which five guys Morgan Scalley and Jordan Gross decide to roll out there. It's not very often that you have to replace an entire starting unit. And more so than any other position group in the sport of football, the offensive line requires time. It requires a cohesion process. It requires communication and chemistry. And I think that while there's a lot of optimism for the young, highly touted recruits in that room, there will be some growing pains. There will be a little bit of a adjustment process for guys that are coming in either from the high school level or coming up from the practice squad. There's just no real question about that. You're going to see early in the season mistakes made. You're going to see early in the season some film study that may be a little more focused on those five guys up front. The names I mentioned, I think, are the 5, 6, or 7 that you will see in the running. Throw Roger Alderman in that as well. But which five are actually trotted out there, week one, snap one, drive one, is going to not just tell us a lot about the coming Utah football season, but it'll tell us, of course, what happened in fall camp. And one of the funny parts about the transition from Kyle Whittingham to Morgan Scalley, we got the fall camp rundown going into 2026, 2027. And I'll tell you, it looks exactly the same. There will be some differences in a Morgan Scalley coached team. There will be some differences in the Monday press conference. You'll see Morgan Scalley's personality differ a little bit from one Kyle Whittingham. But as far as the fall camp procedures and practices, identical. They might have copied and pasted it from last year. So we're not going to get a whole lot of viewing. We're not going to be able to tell you a whole lot about what we see at fall camp. It's going to be a lot of what do we hear at fall camp. And what do they decide to tell us at fall camp? Which is fine. Listen, if I were a head football coach in the college ranks, there would be 0 people allowed to watch our practices, to watch our run walkthroughs. Even if it gives me a 1%, tiny fraction of an advantage on my opponent. Even if it doesn't, but I feel like it does, no one's watching. No one's in the room. That's just part of game planning. That's part of keeping your secrets or keeping your game plan close to the vest. So I understand it. I think there were a lot of folks in the media and in the fan base who were excited to maybe go back to the days of when I was down there giving updates on what we saw all fall camp, and we got to watch practice after practice after practice. We got to see 11 on 11 in the football facility, and we were even allowed to post clips of that with some restrictions. That won't be the case this year. That won't be the case really anywhere in the country going forward, because in 2026 now, coaches and staffs around the country have learned the importance of intel. That's not just a term you hear with the military and with the CIA. Intel is important in college football. Ask the folks at Michigan. Ask Jim Harbaugh. So, listen, I get it. We're not going to learn a whole lot at fall camp, at least with what our eyes can see. But if you tune in next week, you will get interviews from fall camp, starting with one Morgan Scally on August 3rd, and we're very much looking forward to that. Camp Scally. No more Camp Kyle up on the hill. All right. This episode of The Drive, of course, as always, brought to you by our friends at the Utah Road Home. Help Utah kids start school with confidence. Over 200 kids at the Utah Road Home need your help with back-to-school clothes, shoes, backpacks, and more. ESPN 700 invites you to be a child's advocate. Visit ESPN700sports.com or appletreeforkids.com for more information and to donate now. Our friends at the Utah Road Home, of course, partners of ours throughout the year, and then culminating at the end of the year with the Road Home Mediathon around Christmas. We appreciate their support and hope that you can help us in returning that support. Still to come on The Drive today. Trey Fitzgerald will join us on the other side. We'll talk a little bit of RSL. We'll talk some World Cup soccer and the reaction to it. We'll talk some Utah Royals on a match day. Zach Moss will join us in studio talking Utah football, a little NFL offseason. Hey, maybe some high school football with our guy, Coach Moss. Tony Parks will stop by to talk some baseball, some bees, some MLB and SLC, maybe. And then, of course, the show comes to a screeching halt when Dave Fox takes over the studio at 4:30. All that still to come and more on The Drive. I am Porter Larsen, filling in for Spence Checketts, and this is Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, the ESPN 700 app, and now live on YouTube. Welcome in. Drive time on a Tuesday afternoon. Porter Larsen here, filling in for Spence Checketts on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. It is Utah's number one sports talk as the doldrums of summer continue. We are in late July. Of course, some golf, some soccer going on. The rest of the sports world is, for the most part, in the off season. To get to a little soccer, maybe a little more, with our friend Trey Fitzgerald of Real Salt Lake. He stops by the program regularly and, of course, kind enough to fill some time today. Trey, how are you doing today?
Good, Porter, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Of course, we'll talk some RSL. We'll get to the soccer world, maybe a little World Cup reaction as well. But first, our resident Denver Nuggets fan, how do you feel about the last few days in the NBA? The King is headed from Bel Air to Philly, doing the opposite of the Fresh Prince. Draymond Green re-signing in Golden State. So the West looks a little bit different than it did just a few short weeks ago.
Yeah, I'm just waiting on the Nuggets to re-sign Peyton Watson.
There you go.
And go fully into that second apron, which apparently the Cronkies don't want to do by all intents and purposes, but they may have to do because I don't know who's going to take the Christian Brown contract. I hate to see them get rid of Cam Johnson or Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon. Joker, as you know, is waiting until next year to sign his Supermax extension, and I think it's worth an extra $80 million to him if he does it next year and not this year. So all those things are going on. I'm glad Draymond re-signed with the Warriors because I like him being a one-team guy for his career. And then King James, Philly is going to be fun to watch this year. They were already fun to watch with VJ and Maxey.
Right.
Embiid, I could take or leave, as you probably know. But Jaylen Brown and King James with the rest of that group, that's going to be a must-watch on the League Pass every night.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at that roster in totality, the first five is going to be formidable. I mean, even LeBron being 42 years old or going into his 42nd year, you pair him with a Tyrese Maxey, who is in one of the quicker guards in the league, with a Jaylen Brown, who we know is an all-star, really good perimeter defender and super capable offensively. VJ Edgecombe, who is I was high on him coming out of the draft. I think everyone's even higher on him now. And then Joel Embiid, who, the reason you can take it or leave it is probably because you just don't know if he's going to be available. When he is on the floor, he is, number one, the largest man on the floor and maybe one of the most talented players on the floor as well, can kind of score at will. If healthy, that roster is just going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they're probably going to win a bunch of games. And we'll see with LeBron. This has kind of been the case through the last several years, kind of a focus maybe not on the regular season, but we haven't seen Philly in the final since 2001, man. And I think this is going to be a team that, at least on paper, could make things pretty interesting in the East.
Yeah, I think the thing you left off of Embiid's resume is biggest thief of an MVP award in the NBA history. So, but I'm biased. But no, I think you're spot on. They're going to be fun to watch them battle with the Knicks in the East, maybe the Cavs, maybe the Celtics. I don't know. There's a lot more questions than answers all around the NBA because of this second apron thing and some of the salary dumps that have gone on so far this summer.
Yeah, you mentioned the Knicks. The Sixers are now, at least if you ask Vegas, tied with the Knicks for odds at a 2027 NBA title. Them and New York both at 900. And then the two favorites in the Western Conference, it's OKC and San Antonio at plus 270. So if you ask Vegas, for entertainment purposes only, that is your four favorites for an NBA championship. And yeah, the West, although it's going to be really competitive, got a lot younger and a little more interesting going into next year with the developments of the last few days. How about the Utah Jazz, Trey? Adding a Darren Peterson, a guy who showed a lot in the summer league that he's ready at least for the challenge. I think that the Jazz, aren't going to contend for anything in the West this year, but you're going to see a team that's at least a lot more competitive than the one we've seen really since they reset everything.
Well, even though I'm a diehard Nuggets fan and have been since I was 5 years old, I like to see the Jazz do well, and I have since moving here to Salt Lake 22 years ago. And I'm so excited about this team. And you look at what they have with their young guys already. Keontae, Ace, adding DP, and then on top of that, maybe getting to see Laurie and Triple J go 4 quarters a game and try to win and be encouraged to win.
Right.
And then, there's some other guys that are going to step up, either from a development standpoint. I think that team's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. I think they're going to get into the play-in mix. They got to be in that 7 to 10 range.
And I think that you mentioned the part that I'm most excited to see. Of course, the young assets that the Jazz have acquired and drafted are going to be interesting. But for me, seeing Lauri Markkanen and even a Jaren Jackson Jr. in a competitive space, in a place where they are trying to win, where they're not going to get taken off the floor midway through the third quarter because they're up by 15 or I think that part of this roster is one of the things I am most excited to see, because we just haven't had a chance in the Will Hardy era to see them in that space. And I don't want to say it's a disservice to Lauri, because he knows the deal. He knows the way the league rolls and of course the place the Jazz were in, and he decided to sign on and continue down this road. But man, it was, unfortunate to see Lauri, a really good player, an all-star level player here in Utah, have to sometimes kind of take a backseat to the timeline that the Jazz were on. So I think you mentioned the part I'm most excited to see, which is exactly that. Quick thought on the World Cup. Spain, their celebrations are all in the rear view. They've done the parades and paraded the trophy around and all of the above. For me, Trey, really no surprise coming from the result of that World Cup. Spain seemed to be not only the best team in the field, but the best side, with kind of a large gap between them and whoever you consider to be second place. How far ahead of the rest of the world right now is Spain in the soccer realm?
Well, it's a great question. Look, they played a perfect game against France, who I thought was going to win the World Cup, and I thought their second and third strings could have won the World Cup because they're that talented. But Spain was perfect against them. They were near perfect against Argentina. They gave up 1 goal in 7 games in the tournament. They clearly have an identity that's been bred into that program for a generation, 20-plus years. So you just got to give them all the props in the world. And, the names may change, but the philosophy stays the same. And they're going to be favorites in 2030. And, powered by players from the world's biggest clubs, they're going to be fantastic to watch for a long, long time.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, France, if you put France and Spain up against each other, France might have the best player on the field. They might have the best 2 players on the field. But the way that Spain plays, the brand of soccer that they play, is just so connected, so cohesive, and so pretty that it's just really tough to compete with. If you're one of the opposing teams, you have to deal with that for 90 minutes, no matter who subs in, who subs out. And then you have to rely on your Messi or your Mbappe to come through in a big way, right? To probably get 2 goals and an assist or something of the like. And that's just not really a great formula to try to beat a team. And that's where I say they're, not just the best side in soccer, but by a wide margin, not necessarily because of their roster, but because of the brand that they play. And of course, that's a testament to their staff and coaches.
Yeah, and look, I mean, they have been elite forever, and they took it to a whole other level this year.
Yep.
Incredible fun to watch. I don't words kind of defy the description, so I apologize. I'm running out of superlatives for both France and Spain.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. As Trey mentioned, 2030. If you want to put a early wager down for entertainment purposes only, that's the one to hit because Spain's going to be rolling right on through even the next window of the World Cup. All right, how about some domestic football? Real Salt Lake back in action after the World Cup. They looked great against Burnley, and then a little two-match skid. What's going on with RSL, and how do they kind of turn things around after, of course, short, but definitely a very real little skid here?
Yeah, look, I think the game against LA, they played well. They dominated, shots and possession and a lot of the things that don't actually matter in soccer. It's clearly a game where soccer is more art than science, and $50 million to acquire them and an annual salary because they only need one chance each in a game to make the difference. And they caught RSL on a couple counters, a couple defensive breakdowns, and that's the difference in the game. All the shots, all the possession, all the half chances that RSL created with, I think, high pressure in the attacking end and a lot of beautiful opportunities, they didn't come to fruition. So that's the frustration. Then you go to Portland and when you're even strength, you're up 1-0, probably could have been a little more. And then Morgan Guilavogui goes out with a red card, changes the game, can't hold on down a man in a very difficult place to play. I don't know if you've been there, Porter, but I always tell people Providence Park is like the Thunderdome. The fans are right on top of you. They're loud. They're knowledgeable. That club's been around for 50-plus years, so there's a lot of innate ways that those fans have to support their team and give them a true home field advantage. So Pablo and company kind of back to the drawing board this week. One more road game before having 5 home games in 15 days in August, including Leagues Cup. So RSL head off to St. Louis this week without Morgan Guilavogui. Xavier Gozo is at the MLS All-Star game. He's doing the skills challenge tonight. He's doing the game tomorrow, so it'll be all Gozo the next couple days. The first ever Utah native to get voted into the starting 11, the youngest All-Star in RSL history. So very happy for the West Valley born Eagle Mountain raised kid that is making global headlines. And, he's going to be key to the second half success for RSL in Leagues Cup and hopefully a seriously deep run at MLS Cup as well. So, RSL's been dominant at home, winning 8 out of 9, but hasn't been able to take that form on the road. And that's going to be the critical aspect for this team to reach what it wants, which is top 4 seed in the West, home field advantage in the playoffs, maybe a serious run at Supporters Shield. But Leagues Cup does set up well. All 3 of these Phase 1 games are at home, where, again, RSL's been dominant. So we'll get a big test a week from today against Tigres, and then home games on Saturday the 8th and Tuesday the 11th as well. So it's all still there to play for despite a couple bumps in the road this past week.
And you mentioned the playoff picture. RSL currently sitting at number 4, but it's a logjam, right? At 4, RSL with 26. It's essentially a 3-way tie with Houston and Dallas, also 26 points. And then the team you face up with on Saturday, St. Louis, is just 1 point behind with 25, and you have to visit them in St. Louis. Of course, a game in hand on them, but still a really pivotal matchup, I think, against another team that you may be facing in the postseason. What's the matchup look like between Salt Lake and St. Louis from a schematic standpoint?
Yeah, look, St. Louis, they got off to a rough start this year, but now they've won 5 in a row. They've added some international players to their roster. They made a coaching change. They're a much more cohesive unit now than they were in February and March. So it is going to be a battle. Now, that being said, RSL has never lost in St. Louis in 3 previous trips there. So I know that doesn't mean anything, but that'll be something to kind of just keep an eye on Saturday.
You mentioned the Leagues Cup. After the matchup Saturday, it's 3 straight Leagues Cup matchups before you get back to MLS play. How difficult is that when, I'm sure the players kind of try to take it just one game at a time and don't pay much attention to it. But when you are Pablo, right, you're deciding who and when to play and how to mix up minutes with guys between a friendly with Burnley, you back to MLS for a couple games, then you're, of course, after your World Cup break, and now you're into Leagues Cup play before you have to come back and go into the home stretch of the MLS season. How difficult is it for a staff to try to formulate lineups and make decisions when the schedule is so splintered?
Yeah, I mean, I think you find out a lot about your depth, right? Because everybody can't play 90 minutes Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Sunday, whatever. It's tight turnarounds. That's a lot of games in quick succession. And this is where if you're winning, it kind of feeds on itself. Vibes are high. Everybody feels involved and contributing, even if they're only getting 20 or 30 minutes, but then they're going to get a start here and there. So you're going to see heavy rotation. So that's the good side of it, right? Everybody's engaged. But losing those 2 games last week and now going on to another road trip, there is a certain amount of pressure, right, to nip this in the bud before the losing streak, catches more momentum and can fester, if you will. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure going into St. Louis. But then you've got Tigres, one of the best teams in North America, coming in here on Tuesday. And even though you're at home, you want to be fresh. So, I think Pablo and his staff are trying to figure out the best rotations to give everybody a chance to be at their best and to get 3 points Saturday in St. Louis and 3 points Tuesday against Tigres. That's the goal. And, what's the formula? That's what they're trying to figure out. Gozo's going to be a little fatigued coming off of All-Star. He's not going to get back into Utah until 3:30 in the morning on Wednesday night / Thursday morning. So it's just managing all those factors. Clearly, it's 102, 104 degrees every day here this week, so that's a factor. So, the team's trying to train at like 9:30 in the morning to get a break from the heat, but, it's still just another variable to deal with.
It's a match day for the Royals. Give us a little preview. They're on a couple game skid, and the opponent tonight is, just the top team in the league right now. What's the expectations tonight at America First Field? And are you going to get rained on?
So the Royals game is tomorrow night. It's Wednesday. It is a top-of-the-table clash. So Trinity Rodman and the Washington Spirit come into town. They're 3 points ahead of the Royals. The Royals did lose their first 2 back from the international break, but have won the last 2, only giving up 1 goal the last 2 games. So hopefully they're catching fire at the right time. Everybody is back from injury, and we're looking forward to 3 points for the Royals Wednesday night at America First Field.
Wednesday night. I got ahead of myself. Tomorrow is a match day for the Royals, but we appreciate you giving us the update, Trey. Talking little hoops and, of course, all around the soccer world. We'll get some RSL stuff later on in the week and look ahead to St. Louis coming up on Saturday. Thanks, man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Right. Back on the other side, we're going to be talking some football. Utah football, of course, comes your way in 37 days, but we don't have to wait that long for fall camp. August 3rd, the Morgan Scalley era begins in earnest, and we'll preview a little bit of that. We'll talk some NFL offseason, maybe a couple trips down memory lane on the Utes as well, with the top running back in school history. He's our bell cow on the show today. Zach Moss joins the program for an entire hour, and then Tony Park stops by, as does Dave Fox in the 4 o'clock hour. All that and more still to come on a Tuesday edition of The Drive. I am Porter Larsen, filling in for Spence Checketts, and this is Utah's #1 sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back. Drive time on a Tuesday afternoon here in a little rainy afternoon in Salt Lake City. Appreciate you stopping by. Of course, within a week from right now, we'll be up on the hill for Camp Scally. That's right, Morgan Scally era begins in earnest at the University of Utah. Kickoff comes your way September 3rd against Idaho. We'll preview all of that and more, talk a little NFL offseason. Hey, maybe some prep football, too, with our next guest. He is the most productive back in the history of Utah football. Of course, former Buffalo Bill, former Bengal, former Indianapolis Colt. He is one Zach Moss, and he's taken over the air chair there in the studio. What's up, player?
What's up, my man? How you doing?
Doing well. Appreciate your time as always. Always good to see you. Summer, obviously it's off season for football. Kind of a new thing for you, where you're not necessarily prepping to go up against the Baltimore Ravens. You're working with some high school kids. You're a little adjustment this off season. How's it been?
A little adjustment, but it's been real good. Over at Summit Academy out there in Bluffdale, working with those kids. That's been fun. It's been a nice way to move on from NFL stuff and, different way of giving back to the community and staying close to the game in a lot of different ways as well. So it's been real good.
How's the team looking? I will say I had plenty of run-ins with Summit Academy in high school, but never on the football field. When I was once upon a time when I was playing, Summit Academy was just getting going. It was like literally their first decade as a school, and they only had a basketball team. Our guy Everett Gray, listeners of the station will recognize, former UNLV Rebel. He was their basketball coach.
Okay.
And right off the bat, they were like really competitive in the basketball side, but they didn't even have a football team yet. So it's still pretty new. Up there.
Still pretty new. Two-way football, so we got a really good squad, honestly. We got a lot of good players, really good coaching staff. So when you put those type of things hand in hand, we'll get a good product on the field real soon here. So creeping real close to the first game. So it's going to be an exciting time. It's a good time to, start learning about Summit football, because I think we got a real good shot of doing some real good things. So, and the kids are ready. So it's exciting.
I'll have to pull up your schedule, but circle that South Summit game and I'll be there.
Yeah, we got.
I'll be wearing green, but I'll be there.
Yeah, we got some real good games. Got some real good competition coming our way. Like I said, it's like we're getting real close to that first kickoff versus Logan High School, and get our first win as a new coaching staff and get our era of Summit Academy football start off the right way here.
September 25th, you gotta head up to Camas.
Yeah,
and you'll face off with my boys. Bunch of my former teammates are there now, coaching and whatnot. So nice. I'll make the trip up for that one. I'll give you a little tour guide around Camas. Although you've been up around that area, up in Heber and whatnot, quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Let's get to some expectations of Utah football this year. Of course, a completely new era. The happenings of the offseason are very well documented, very well known. Kyle Whittingham is now in Ann Arbor, which still to me sounds weird and will be weird. Even when I see him run out onto that field at the big house wearing the maize in yellow, it's going to be a maize and blue. Going to be a little odd for me to see that, just having been literally, Zach, my entire life spans the Kyle Whittingham Utah career. Yeah. He took the job as an assistant, I think, 2 months before I was born at the University of Utah. His only other stop, of course, up in Idaho, doing some assistant stuff. And then literally my entire lifespan, I have watched the Utah football program, my entire family, big fans of it, under Kyle Whittingham. Yeah. So it's going to look a little weird. It's going to look a little odd to everyone involved. But here in Salt Lake, I think it's going to look pretty damn similar. Now, we'll get into this. Yeah. Morgan Scalley has a different MO. He's got a different personality from Kyle Whittingham for sure. But I think the football is going to be pretty similar, no?
I agree. Obviously, like you said, the personality, that's going to look totally different.
Right.
If anybody's been following, you can see that already. I think I just saw a post of him pulling up to one of the big Utah fans' house.
Shout out Albert. Albert's a huge listener of the show. He's probably listening right now.
So that was really, really cool. And Scalley's done a great job of, being in the community and letting people see him, right? That's been really cool to see. But like you say, from the football aspect, it's going to be the same. It's going to be smash mouth football, tough, fast, physical guys, right? Like that's the mantra. That is what, Coach Witt learned. That's what he implemented. And same thing is going to be with Scalley, right? It's not going to be, beyond something out of our imaginations of what the offense is going to look like, what the defense is going to look like. It's going to be a run-first team that controls the ball, no turnovers, and allows the defense to go out there and play a very physical style, right? Those things aren't going to change. That's what has built Utah football, like you said, your entire lifetime. So from the football aspect of things, absolutely, it will be very, very similar. Just hopefully, we can get some more wins and take this thing all the way.
Where do you think there might be a little bit of a divergence on the football side? I mean, you were a running back. Both of those guys are obviously more defensive minded. So, maybe we'll ask Steven Sylvester and those guys this as the season comes closer. But where on the football side of things do you think there might be some sort of delineation with Morgan from the Kyle era? I feel like maybe, and this is probably just because it's his first year and Kyle was here for 30.
Yeah.
It may be less hands-on with some of the offensive stuff. You might be able to see a little bit more creativity. But then again, a Kyle Whittingham team we saw last year with Jason Beck at the helm was probably the most creative offense I've ever seen at Utah and at really high-level Division I football. So I don't know. I wonder where the football side of things may diverge from one coach to another.
I think Coach Scalley will allow the offense to be the offense. I think, with Coach Witt, obviously when he first took the job in 2004, I believe it was, I'm pretty sure he probably allowed the offense to be the offense. It's your first time as a head coach. You don't know what you don't know, and you got to kind of get a feel for things. I think mainly from, what I've seen and what I've heard and what I'm hoping, right, I think the only big difference I can see is that Coach Scalley will want to see more pass plays. He's worked in the secondary for so long, right? He obviously plays safety and things like that. I think that's a sleeper idea that people haven't really spoken about is all the knowledge that he knows in the back end and all the great safeties that he's either played with and produced to go on to the NFL and stuff like that. If he has anything to say, it would be how can you attack, what plays would give us issues as a defensive-minded coach, specifically a defensive back type of a coach. I think that's where we're going to see a big difference is, Coach Witt was, a running back's best friend, right? He's a guy who does not want to have turnovers, and he wants you to control the ball, right? So
as long as you keep that ball off the turf.
Yeah, as long as you keep the ball off the turf, then, you got to switch it up. But if you can do that, then you were his guy. With Coach Scalley, I think with us being in this new era of football and understanding how these offenses are so much more spread out and it's not as much under center game and play action game and, run the ball 3 straight plays. You got to air it out, and you got 2 dynamic quarterbacks. I think that's part of the reason he wanted to get both of those guys back as well. So if I had to guess, I would say the biggest difference is going to be, obviously his knowledge on the back end and giving that knowledge over to the offensive side of the ball, so that way they can create more pass plays, more chunk plays, and be more explosive to go up against the BYUs and the Texas Techs. Because as we saw last year, as great as our run game was, our offensive line was, when we went up against those two teams, that's where things got a little stifled for us.
Right. That's where I think there's a lot of hope from fans, is that whether it's creativeness or not, just a little bit more production in the throw game.
Yeah.
I talked about in the opening segment, we haven't had a 1,000-yard receiver since Drez Anderson, which was before your time here. And for Utah, I don't necessarily think that you need to have a 1,000-yard receiver to have a productive wide receiver room.
Yeah.
But just the fact that you haven't had one now in a decade and a half is kind of an outlier, right? It alludes to the point that you aren't throwing the ball at a rate that a lot of other teams are. Now, here's the other point. A lot of times pass run balance is not a great way to look at that metric, because if you're winning football games, you're going to be running at 60-40. You're not going to be putting the ball in the air and stopping the clock when you're up 27-7 or you're running USC off the field. There's just no reason to do it. And that is part of the context of Kyle's era at Utah as well. Yeah, he wanted to run the football. He wanted to control the time, control the clock in time of possession. But he also won a whole bunch of football games. And when you do that, you just don't throw the ball as much. And, yeah, maybe that's not as entertaining from the stands, but that's a brand of football that works if that's the way you go.
It definitely works. I look at it. I peel back a few more curtains on that. Not having a 1,000-yard receiver in that amount of time span is, one, pretty bad.
Yeah. We have more games now too.
Yeah.
Like you got to,
and you miss out on the big time recruits.
Yep.
Right. Pass catchers that are in your backyard. Right. Either go down south or they leave the state. Right. Those are the things that you kind of have to think about, which I'm sure the coaching staff hopefully is thinking about when they're sitting in those meetings. And you got to continue to bring in talent. Right. You don't want to keep bringing in, the lower skill guys, especially now with all the NIL stuff and things of that nature, right? So, like you said, does this team structured the way it is right now, do I think we have a clear-cut 1,000-yard person? Probably not. But do I think we can get guys who can get 500, 600, 700 yards and spread the ball out? That makes the team a lot more well-balanced. And our running game isn't, I'm a realist, so I would probably say that what we did last year probably won't be able to do that as well.
Right.
It'll probably fall off a few ticks, but it's probably still going to be the best run game in the conference and one of the top ones in the nation. So the offense can just be well balanced, and you got pass catchers, right? The tight end, when you are a run-heavy team, right, is pivotal, right? So we can get a tight end or two that can come in, that can be versatile guy when it comes to blocking and pass catching the ball, right? With two quarterbacks that you have, and Dan Pierre is really good, that's only going to help us overall. So, and then that you put a year like that, and you get these guys 600, 700 yards, and you continue to go out and you recruit, and you get a chance to bring in some even more talent at the receiver spot, and you have somebody who might want to, hey, I'm gonna be the first guy to break this 1,000-yard curse that we haven't had in a while.
And the important part that you note is that while I don't think this team structurally necessarily has or needs one of those 1,000-yard receivers, right? Because you have so many different weapons: a Hunter Andrews, a Nate Johnson, a Burt Ficklin, a Daniel Bray. The recruiting side of it is a big point, right? When you don't have a 1,000-yard receiver, and you look back at the history of the school, the only time that they got those types of recruits was when they were turning out 1,000-yard receivers. Yeah. Drez Anderson, Steve Smith. You go back and see the Sugar Bowl teams. Yeah. They were throwing the ball a little bit more, but there is an aspect of that where if there's not the opportunity to put up those kind of numbers, there are some recruits who may not even look at your school, regardless of whether or not it's a good place to develop, right? We've seen guys develop into NFL players. That's not a question. Tim Patrick had a great career. Britton Covey, Devon Vele. Yeah. You go up and down the list. There are guys that come here and develop into NFL wide receivers without maybe the top-end production that you see usually. Yeah. But sometimes recruits don't look that deep into it when they're narrowing down their list.
Yeah, it's hard for an 17, 18-year-old kid to sit back and say, what would I be in 6, 7 years, right? That's the hard thing to do. But, we've had great coaching for a very, very, very long time. It will be interesting to see the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, is a new offense and things of that nature, and see how well they can click and things like that. But, yeah, I think with the recruiting, you got to look, when you're analyzing things, I think it's always pretty critical to think about the future, right? Obviously, the now is always easy because we're sitting there, right? But when you try to, I've been around enough people who make those type of decisions, and you learn, okay, they're not thinking about, just this season. They're thinking about the roster construction of next season, the year after that, and the year after that, right? So, that's just the mindset you have to be in, and I think, we got really, really smart people up there. So, I'm not really worried about it.
Quarterback position. Devin Dampier obviously returning. He was awesome last year. What folks don't know, or now they do, but didn't know at the time, was that he was dealing with some legitimate ankle injuries really the entire season. It was the Wyoming game where he kind of re-aggravated and fully sprained an ankle. Almost didn't come back in that game, ended up coming back, throwing a crazy touchdown, and then, of course, playing out the remainder of the season. Two things. What are your expectations of a healthy Devin Dampier, and what are your expectations of Devin Dampier staying healthy?
I think the expectation of him staying healthy, I think, last year him battling, he kind of knows his body. He knows what he can take. And dealing with an ankle injury as a mobile quarterback it's almost like a death sentence. That is really, really hard to do. It doesn't matter if it's a high ankle or a low ankle sprain. It is a really hard thing to battle each and every week. And, that's obviously when you think about practice, it's limited practice reps, it's limited throws, it's limited running. So all of these things that you see him end up doing, essentially after the Wyoming game, is coming with limited reps throughout the week of practice, which is, just speaks to the type of talent he is. But I think keeping him healthy is going to be the main thing. And I think we're going to be able to run the ball with the backs that we have. We've all seen, Wayshawn's been pretty outspoken about him wanting to be that 1,000-yard rusher. And I think that's a way you keep him healthy, right? You don't give him too many designed runs. And
right.
I think that was something that, I was pretty critical about last year, was so many designed runs early in the year because your body, it's like a boxer, right? You got to build up the callus, right? That's why you prep for so long, so when you get in that ring, your body doesn't just crumble, right? So I thought it was a lot of quarterback runs early in the year when they don't get hit in this time of the year. And that's going to be hard to keep anybody healthy. So you lean on the running game, right? You lean on the play action game, and you get them out in space. Don't give them too many, A to B gap runs too early on. And, that's also the part why you have Ficklin, right? Guy who can come in, change the pace, do a lot of different things as well. So both of those guys playing together is only going to help each other. It's kind of like having that two-back system that you see so many teams in the NFL do, right? It's like, okay, you got one guy who's essentially like your bruiser and the other guy who's kind of like your speed back. In this sense, Ficklin is more your, scat back quarterback where he can break a 60-yard run and change the game on his head. And Dampier is your guy who can do everything, right? That back who can pick up the blitzes, catch the ball out of the backfield, get you 5-6 yards each and every time he touches the ball. He can do everything. So I think that's the right formula to keeping him healthy. But if he's healthy, the numbers that he can put up, which we saw him do at his previous school, I think this offense is going to give him a lot more space. I always felt like last year watching him, knowing that we didn't have a very dynamic pass game, that the safeties got to play pretty low on him.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it also, when we did take these shots, he wasn't the most accurate on those deep shots as well. So
you could tell he wasn't stepping into those throws with his full strength.
Exactly.
Yep.
It was kind of like he was more just launching the ball and hoping that the guy ran up under it or it came short or whichever it was. But I think when you are a player who has the aspirations of being a really good player, which I'm sure he does, those are the things that you look at, right? You go back, you watch the film, you're like, okay, hey, I wasn't healthy here. I'm going to be healthy now, right, and do the right things throughout the year to continue to stay healthy so I can make those deep plays, because once you start making those deep plays and you back up, that secondary, and you have a guy like him who's, very elusive in the backfield, that's even more yardage. So, I'm looking for at least 2,500, 3,000 yards passing from him, and the offense will be humming.
Yeah, there was quite a few times last year where I was kind of concerned what the deep balls looked like with Dev. It sometimes looked like a punt, right, where he was just chucking it up there and playing 500. What I didn't know at the time was just how bad the injury on his plant leg was, and the fact that he wasn't able to step into those throws. That's probably the part of his game that I think could take him to the next level, but also coming into the season healthy is what I'm going to be paying a lot of close attention to, because, as you mentioned, if he can dial in the deep ball, push those safeties back a little bit, get those linebackers on their heels a little bit, I think that can completely change the dynamic. And then as far as staying healthy, I'm with you. You get a little luck. You slide a little bit more. Listen, Utah fans know the deal with the quarterback staying healthy. You go back to Cam Rising, Tyler Huntley, Jordan Wynn, Travis Wilson. It really has seemed like the last decade of Utah football, the quarterbacks have, whether bad luck or freak accidents or a Gatorade thing on the sideline Cam runs into, it just seems like there's always something with the quarterback. And that's part of the game, but a little bit of an outlier with Utah is how often that has been kind of a storyline. If you can keep him healthy, I think it does a lot for your offense and for your ceiling as a football team. And part of that, I'm with you. I think you're going to have design runs. That's part of his game. Yeah. But you also do have a Burt Ficklin. You have a Nate Johnson. You have a Hunter Andrews, who we saw taking snaps a little bit last year. More of that, especially early in the year. If you're in the Big 12 championship game and you need Dev to, you need an extra lead blocker, snap him the ball.
I think it was the UCLA game, right, where he was running crazy and he had everybody so hyped because he was making all these crazy plays.
Yep.
But, that's all fun. But then you get to 3-4 weeks into the season and then you got a knick-knack injury, right, something that you could prevent to some degree, right? But, like you said, when something works, right, if I run the ball 10 times with my quarterback and he walks out of the game with 85, 90 yards and he tells me he's all good to go, right, of course I'm going to think about how I can double another play in for next week versus a team who doesn't have as much talent as a UCLA because, I watched that UCLA game and I was like, he is dynamic. He was making every single play, kind of looked like a young Russell Wilson out there just making plays with his legs and scrambling and doing the whole nine. But early on in the year, you don't need that because I think we have a really, really well-balanced offense with so many players, like you mentioned, right, that can do so many different things, that guys who can get out on the edge, specifically on the edge, guys who can run between the tackles, guys who are going to have to step up and make plays in the receiver room to make his job easier, take a lot more off of his body and off of his plate, right, as you see like a Lamar Jackson in a sense of that word.
That is Zach Moss. I am Porter Larsen. We're talking a little Utah football a week ahead of fall camp. We'll take a quick break, and on the other side, a little running back room chat. We'll take a look at what Utah's got running in the backfield and go from there. It's a Tuesday edition of The Drive, and you're listening to Utah's number one sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back. Drive time on a Tuesday afternoon. Porter Larsen here, filling in for Spence. It is ESPN 792.1 FM. Of course, we are now live, up and available on YouTube as well, where if you tune in, you'll see in front of you who has taken over the captain's chair here at the station, Zach Moss, the former Ute, former NFL running back, and friend of the program, friend of the show. Zemo, of course, we talked a lot about the wide receivers, talked a lot about Morgan Scalley and Coach Witt and the differences between those two. How about that running back room, though, for Utah football coming into 2026? Wayshawn Parker, he was really productive. He was really good last year. Part of that conversation is that he had the top offensive line maybe in the land. Yeah. But you got to be confident about what he can do in year two. And from all intents and all words up on the hill, it sounds like he has put in a really good offseason about getting his body to the next level and getting ready to make an audition for what he wants to be another career after his college days.
Yeah. He had a real good year last year. He came in and, I think early in the year we all were kind of under the impression that it was going to be a, running back spot committee type of kind of a thing. And, midway through that year, he pretty much separated himself from those other guys. Very similar to, my sophomore year when I was there, where it was myself, Armand Shine, Devontae Henry Cole. I want to say Troy McCormick was still there as well, where, none of us had been a starting running back after Joe Williams had left. All of us played that year before, and that's what you got to do when you talk about being a really good back and have the, aspiration, like I said, of being a really good player. So he's doing all the right things. He already done one thing that, that I can make a connection with, is separating himself. So now that part's over, right? Now I come into this next season, I know what I need to do to continue to get bigger, faster, stronger. Very similar to my mindset as well when I came back from my junior year, right, where it was I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew exactly what I needed to get better at. I knew exactly what I needed to do to get stronger, and things like that. So, I'm looking for him to have a big year. They're going to need it. It should even give it even more motivation when people say, oh, well, you had the best offensive line, right, in the nation most likely, and it's hard to say you didn't, right, but that's not on you, right? That's good coaching and good recruiting, right? So looking for him to have a big year. He's going to get the bulk of the carries, so all the things that he asked for last year. When you ask for those things and you work for those things, now it's a chance to, show everybody what you can do from day one and be that guy that the team, not just your running back room, but the team can count on, that every single time that you touch the ball, you're going to do the right things with it.
One of the variables that the offensive line does present when you replace all five guys is that early last year, I think one of the things that I noticed with Wayshawn was it did take him some time to kind of learn the steps in front of him, right? Another thing you can relate to a little bit, I saw him running up the backs of linemen a few times, right? Or not necessarily knowing the timing of the pulls on some of those plays. Then towards the end of the year, he really started to settle in and really started to play the running back position and not just carry the football, right? Because the running back position is much more than that. When you are identifying gaps and you're seeing how the play is developing in front of you, you can get by just bulldozing through people. But to reach your ceiling, you got to really know what's going on in front of you. And he got a lot better of that as the season went along. Well, now he's got 5 different guys in front of him that play a little bit differently, have a little bit different timing, probably have a little bit different footwork, which is something you're watching as a running back. What's the difficulty there when you got so used to the timing, the cadence of the guys in front of you, and along with Devin Dampier, you're now having to relearn that with a whole collection of newbies?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think it should be a little bit smoother for him this year. Obviously last year was his first time with all five of those guys
Right.
in front of him, and it took him a while to, get used to how fast this guy comes off this combo block, right? If he's going to be able to reach him or not, right? What's his body angle? What do I think he's going to do? When I talk to him on Wednesday in the hallway while we're getting Gatorade, hey man, when you get up on this play, I want you to do this a lot faster for me, right? Having those conversations with your offensive line, right? Don't just go to practice and that's the first time you talk to those guys, right? Like these guys are the guys that are going to make your life so much easier. So that was something I learned to do, which hopefully, he can do that. And, hey man, I need you to go faster here. I want you to do this on this play. I want you to do that on this play, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're in between those white lines, we're the guys that's playing. No matter what coaches might have told you, Kobe might have told you, hey, I need you to take a B block here, and I'm like, hey, forget that B block, get to that A block or whatever it may be. So I think this year it'd be a little bit different for him because he'll have, that nuance to it of already being going through it, and now he can help those guys catch up to his speed. Because the offensive line and running backs work hand in hand. But like I said, I think a lot of the film, is only continue to watch as he continued to watch film. I'm pretty sure last year and the coaching did a great job of continuing to show him, hey, this is what we need to do here. This is what we need to do, get better here. Now you have all the confidence in the world. He ended the year off really, really well. He didn't get to the 1,000-yard mark like he wanted that he's been vocal about, right? So when you have all of this fuel, right, you got I got five new guys. That's an opportunity for you to show that, hey, I'm the guy that was making things go no matter what, no matter how good my offensive line might been. I could have just been a pretty blind running back, right, and kept running to the backs of these guys when I didn't have to, right? So, I think he talked about it a little bit at the Big 12 Media Day where, he was talking about the guys that in front of him. He was giving those guys a lot of praise and things like that, which you should do. And that makes those guys want to go out there, and block for you when they see you make those type of plays. So it's all about just continuing to strengthening that bond with these new guys and making sure that, you got their back the way they got yours.
Yeah, it's a relationship you got to build, and it takes time, right? So we'll, I'm sure, see some growing pains, see some adjustments early on in the year, but pretty confident about how they develop as the year goes along. Backing Wayshawn up, most likely is Daniel Bray, a sophomore who last year, and we'll see Daniel Bray probably involved in the offense in different ways if they can get him some more touches, even maybe as a slot guy or a scat back in some form. They're going to get him involved. But as far as the running back position goes, he's probably going to be your number two. Stevie Chavez Soto as well. LaMarcus Bell, you've heard good things about, but Daniel Bray's the one to probably look at, and a completely different kind of back from Wayshawn Parker. He is a burner. He's a speedster. He's got even at the high end Division I level, an elite speed. What are your expectations and maybe thoughts on how much you see Daniel Bray in the backfield?
I think that comes from the offensive creativity. Find a way. I think he's able to run between the tackles. I don't think maybe that's his strong suit physically of keeping him healthy for the whole entire year. I don't think you won't probably get the most out of it. So I think from the creativity part of the offense, right, from OC to run game coordinator, all that type of stuff, finding ways to get him in space, right? That is the number one goal. Last year, he did a lot of jet sweeps, which were electric plays. He ran jet sweeps, and they figured out ways to get him in motion and still make the play.
Returns sometimes.
Yeah, get him in returns, get him in some quick screens, receiver screens, RB screens, whatever it may be. Finding a way to utilize a special talent who can do a lot of things. That's really hard to do. Because again, you have so many really good players, right? You have a Dampier, you have a Fulton, you have a Parker, you got some guys in the receiver room that's, going to make plays for us as well. But he's the change of pace guy, right? Kind of like I talked about where in the NFL you got two different backs, right? You got the kind of guy does everything in a sense, and then you got the guy who comes in and splashes things, right? Throws things off a little bit. So as long as he can continue to be explosive, which I'm sure he's going to do, because I think the flashes that he showed last year has given him the opportunity to come in and make more plays as the number two. Obviously he wasn't really the two last year. I think it's that right, Nashawn.
Yep.
Was the number two last year. So him coming in and doing some different things and changing up the speed of the game, jet sweeps, counter sweeps, right? It's a lot of different things you can do with him. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. Like you said, this offense has so many different guys, and that's really the strong suit of the offense, right? So looking forward to seeing what he can do for us this year.
We've talked quite a bit about the creativity on the offensive side, right? Did Jason Beck, his play calling allowed for a whole bunch of things that you may have never seen on a football field. You may never see him again. Yeah. Handing the ball off into a read option. Yeah. Right? Like he did some stuff both in New Mexico and here that I just loved as a football fan. Not just looking at it and it feeling a little different, but also keeping the defense on their heels, right? Kevin McGivern doesn't necessarily have that type of play calling style as far as I don't want to say gimmicky stuff, but a lot of eye candy, right, before the snap and kind of trickery, if you will. But he is a creative play caller, and I think the interesting part here is he now has the personnel that Jason Beck had where he was being creative. I mean, you think of a Burt Ficklin, a Hunter Andrews who was taking snaps, a Nate Johnson who is just listed as athlete, like Mono Carvalho is a returner, but also probably someone they want to get involved on the offense. Semi Tuilonga, who is a defensive lineman who sometimes catches balls out of the backfield. I'm really curious to see how Kevin McGivern builds upon that, but also how much he is willing to do the things that we saw establish these guys as offensive threats that aren't really traditional things we see on a football field. I mean, how, from your perspective, do you see the creative side of this offense remaining? Because you have the personnel, but now you got a different play caller who isn't necessarily known for that style.
Yeah, that'll be the tricky part, and that's why when you asked me about Bray, I said that's why it come down to the offensive creativity.
Right.
Obviously, with Beck, we knew what he could do and things of that nature, and he showed it. You can't just line up and hand the ball off and be that type of style running offense that we were last year. I think the part that helps McGivens is that you got a lot of these guys returning that has run this system. And when they get to those trickier eye candy plays, things that you need guys to, like, think about it. With Beck last year installing these plays, right, probably took a minute, right? He probably installed this thing early on to where we can run it in live game action, and it went off without a hinge, right? He won't have to really worry about that to some degree, right? It'll be now on him to know when to call it, right? That what makes a play caller really good, right? Because maybe a lot of people who don't know the whole job of the offensive coordinator, these coordinators, is their main job is to know when to call these plays, right? Offensive coordinators have, the run game coordinator, the pass game coordinator, right? Third down plays, things of that nature, right? Everybody, it's a group project, right? And his job is to then present it, right? I think Beck was really good. Those plays were great plays, right? But you can draw, or anybody can draw a really good play, right?
Yeah.
When do you run it? Do I run this on 1st and 10 at the 40-yard line? Do I run this on 2nd and 6 here, right? Is this a play I run on 39? Or do I run this play on 1st and 10? Hopefully I get 5 yards to set up my next play, then come back to this play in the third quarter, run it again, right? It's a lot of different things there. And that's the fun part when it comes to, camp is coming up, right? So you get to see these things a little bit more on a daily basis, kind of start to see what the offensive identity is going to be. It's going to be different from last year, right? That's common sense. You have a new offense, a new coordinator, somebody in the room that is totally different from someone you had last year. But the best teams are player-run teams. So if these guys can figure out a way to, take control of the offense in a sense, as in, everybody's up to speed. Everybody's doing the same things. Everybody's, holding each other accountable, because it's hard to have a new coordinator. We had 3 coordinators in 4 years when I was there, and, it was difficult. It was difficult because sometimes you don't have the same, this scheme versus a Ludwig scheme, right, is totally different, right? The blocking scheme can be totally different. But the good thing is you have those guys returning, has all been in it. You could communicate, right? That's the biggest thing. So it'll look different. It'll feel different. But, this team has shown, from what I've seen through social media, that they really do have a tight-knit group. Kind of reminds you of, like, the Knicks, right? Like, it's just a bunch of guys but they actually, care about the product. They care about each other and things like that. So, I got faith in that part.
And yeah, you mentioned the interesting part of play calling is sometimes it's when and how you run those plays, not the plays you actually draw up. We've been playing football for 200 years, and for the most part, it looks similar to how it looked 100 years ago. The play call, the art of play calling is, when to call those plays, but also, am I going to call this play? Maybe, I get 3 or 4 yards here, but that's not my goal. My goal is to set the defense up to react to it a certain way, and then I'm going to run this play in the third quarter. I'm playing multiple different chess games if I'm an offensive coordinator, and I have no concerns about Kevin McGivern's offense. I'm just wondering what it looks like when he's calling plays with this personnel and how different it looks. It's going to be one of the storylines of the season. We'll get you in here again before kickoff. We'll hopefully, of course, hear from you during the football season. But you mentioned some hoops on the way out. My Knicks, defending champs, and our guy, we're both big LeBron fans, is headed to Philadelphia. What have you thought about this offseason and ultimately his choice?
I love the move. I love this offseason. This offseason has been pretty eventful. Giannis going to Miami. Obviously, Jaylen Brown pretty much getting kicked out of Boston without really saying he got kicked out of Boston, but we all know
they were they were done with Jaylen Brown.
Yeah. So I've loved this offseason. It's made me really want to watch this upcoming season, right? To see what the new Lakers look like, right? Because the Lakers are always the top of a topic, right? So to see what that looks like, to see what. Hopefully, I'm hoping Devin Booker gets traded to the Pistons, because I think the Pistons have a really, really good team, but they don't have that secondary option. Spurs coming back, OKC doing all this. So I love it. Obviously, LeBron stole the show, like he's known to do here and there.
Yeah.
And drag it out the whole summer, but that made it fun to turn into ESPN every single day and check out what's going on with LeBron today. I thought he would go to Golden State. But the thing that he's talked about that he says doesn't matter, ring culture, clearly we all know to play a game, the end goal is to win a championship. So there's nothing technically wrong with the pick. I've seen so many people say they have a problem with it. Oh, he's ring chasing and things like that. And I saw Derek Fisher say a really, really good quote. I don't know if you saw it. But it was, it's not ring chasing if you're the one creating the rings.
Right.
I was like, that's the first I've heard of that, and that's a really good kill off to that stupid ring culture. He's chasing rings type of a thing. But as long as Philly can stay healthy, and essentially Embiid, when I say Philly, right? As long as he can stay healthy, I don't know why it wouldn't be your Knicks versus Philly, which would be just an epic replay of the first round. I don't know if you guys beat them, but we'll see.
Yeah, that'll be fun. And yeah, to be honest, like if I'm a star in the league, or if I'm a fan of a team, I kind of want those guys to be ring chasing. Like, that's the whole goal. That's the whole point. Even with Kevin Durant, like, joining a 73 win team, the optics of it are one thing, but also, like, you kind of have to respect the fact that he just did what mattered to him, which is winning a ring. And ultimately, like, with LeBron, it's not like he went to Cleveland because they were went back to Cleveland because they were the team with a bunch of talent that would obviously win a ring. He's ring chasing in a way where he wants to go win a championship, but also have an impact on an organization.
In a city.
He's not joining the 73 win Warriors. He's joining a franchise who hasn't been to the finals since Allen Iverson in 2001, right? So it's not like he's joining some super team and it's going to be an easy route.
Still a lot of questions.
That's
a lot of questions.
Good roster,
Great
really
roster.
fun. But yeah, that's I kind of push that narrative to the side because, number one, you should be ring chasing, and number two, it's a guy who has been pretty loyal to the teams that he's at and pretty straightforward with the fact that it might not be a permanent thing. He's open to going elsewhere if he can go win there.
To your point, he honors every single contract.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't force his way out of things like a James Harden, right? So you got to respect that as an athlete. And, to, like you said, to impact the city, impact an organization, possibly win a fourth ring on a fourth different team, which has never been done before in NBA history, right? I think even when KD left to go to the Warriors, which I wasn't a fan of, right? Because
of course.
That's a really, really stacked.
Not only did you join the 73 win Warriors, they were the ones that knocked you out of the Western Conference Finals while you were right on the cusp.
While you had a 3-1 lead.
Yeah.
So that was tough. But in the hindsight, right, because hindsight is always 20/20, right? Now you turn on YouTube and you're like, man, I wish I would have really just enjoyed that moment, that span of, 3-4 years of Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and countless others, and Steve Kerr with that magical ball movement. That was just like watching the modern era Spurs.
If you can turn off the narrative, if you can shut it out, why wouldn't Kevin Durant want to go to a place where the floor spacing is perfect and you live in a basketball utopia? Like, ultimately, that's the base of the conversation. And if you were Kevin Durant, it would be hard to maybe turn that down.
Dream job.
Yep, that's
the dream job.
That's probably it. All right, Zemo, we'll get you back in soon. We got kickoff in just over a month. We got camp in just about a week. So, man, this thing's coming up on us. And September 25th, South Summit Academy. I'll be in campus with you.
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Love it. That's Zach Moss, former Ute, of course, the top running back in program history on the production standpoint, former Indianapolis Colt, Buffalo Bill, Cincinnati Bengal, and of course, friend of the show, friend of the program, Zach Moss. Big thanks to him for stopping by and taking the time. Back on the other side, 4 o'clock hour, Tony Parks, Dave Fox, a couple of very, very familiar broadcasters here in the market. We'll go all over the map with those guys and then hand it over to today's best. You'll hear from Gordy Chiesa, Brett Ciancia, and more with Sean O'Connell in the 5 o'clock hour. That comes your way. Still coming up on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Little George Strait bringing us back in, as is the case when our next guest joins the show. Am I blue? I know our friend Tony Parks is blue, not in the way that George Strait's singing about. Just his Michigan maize and blue. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. I definitely am. I love that you play this. It's so perfect, too, being here in the state of Texas. I'm right outside of Houston in the land of Sugar Land. So to hear some George Strait, it was very fitting every way around, all the way around, the way that you played that song coming in. So happy to be on, happy to be at the ballpark, excited with football right around the corner. It's a fun time of year, man.
Let's we'll wrap back around to the football and in your Michigan blue, but let's start with what you just mentioned. You're in Texas for some baseball. Give us a preview of the week for the Salt Lake Bees.
Yeah, it's crazy. The Angels and the Astros are playing each other in Anaheim, and then their AAA teams are playing, here in the Lone Star State. The Bees right now, this offensive lineup is terrific. I mean, this is an explosive offense, one of the best we've had in a long time. The tough part for Salt Lake right now is that the pitching has, it's come and it's gone, and right now it's gone overall, big picture. It's just been really, really rough. George Clausen looks amazing. He looks like he's the next guy to be called up, but there's a number of guys trying to find their footing right now in the rotation. And so that has been the tough part. Like last week, they had such a positive series with all these great individual performances and all these games with a double-digit number of hits and high number of runs. But the problem is they lost 5 out of 6 because at the end of the day, trying to keep teams off the board is a really tough thing. And they were even down to the final strike at one point and gave up a grand slam to flip the score and flip the lead. So, but it's always fun. They're right back at it. And 3 home stands left for the Bees, so we hope to see everybody out at the ballpark at some point from now to the end of the year.
Yeah, 3 home stands, and while they sit at the bottom of the PCL at the moment, it's kind of a logjam. So, I mean, you roll off 3 straight home wins, and you're right back there in the conversation. So we'll keep a close eye on the Bees and the happenings there, and of course, see you back at the ballpark in no time, TP. Sticking on the baseball side, there's been more and more rumblings, more and more discussions about potential expansion in Major League Baseball. And while this would probably not happen until well after the collective bargaining situation is dealt with, more and more voices, including Jeff Passan, have basically said that Salt Lake's the leader in the clubhouse, and it would take something happening for that to change. We know you work for the team and maybe sometimes have to be careful with your words and how you cover this type of story. But I wonder what you're hearing and what you know and what you expect over the next couple of years with the MLB and SLC firestorm kind of continuing. A lot of folks are at least excited about the possibility and the prospect of it.
Well, they should be excited about it because MLB has wanted to expand. There's no doubt. That discussion, I mean, it's been there for a while, and a lot of the conversation was about one East and one West. And so the big discussion there for a long time was what is happening with Oakland, what is happening with Las Vegas, and then what's going on with the Tampa Bay Rays. Like, there was so much happening where a lot of the picture just wasn't clear for a long time, and now it's starting to clear up in that way. It's going to be post-CBA that we would find out exactly what's going to happen. But from everything that I've gathered, Rob Manfred would love to have something like this as, one of those last things that happened throughout the course of his career is that he would be able to expand. And if that were to happen, so now you start talking about who are the cities, where do they go? And we could go all day long about how we would love Major League Baseball in Utah. Of course we would. So just like we would go off about how we would love to see Utah in the Pac-12 back in the day and BYU to be in a power conference someday. And those conversations go on, but then you go into, okay, well, what actually has to happen? And for the longest time, you would have college football programs do the most that is in your control to make yourself as attractive as possible, and then have things eventually open up to where the opportunity is there. Salt Lake, more than any place, by a mile, in my opinion, has done more in their control than you could ever ask a city or, let's say, even an ownership group to do. Because not only would Salt Lake, let's say, have a place for the games, they would have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed for all the headaches to be out of the way, so that when it's like, yeah, we'll go with you, boom, it goes right into work. The planning is all ready and set to go. You also have the ownership. You also have exactly how they would want to game plan, implementation, going from the very beginning that it would be announced into, like I said, shovels in the dirt and all of that happening right away. So many other cities, and there's still a ton of poker to be played, a lot of other cities, you just still have a ton of question marks. So one that people wouldn't know about is West Sacramento, not Sacramento, but West Sacramento, which is very unique and very different to that, on how they could be a contender in this. But
Sounds like we lost old Tony Parks there. We'll effort him back on the telephone line here. TP, we lost you for a moment.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I think West Sacramento is an interesting player in this, not Sacramento, because I guess it's very different on how the land works out there.
Gotcha.
And the way the politics get involved. I don't know everything about that, but I heard it's uniquely different. So if Sacramento were to nab a new team after the A's leave, that's a possibility, because a lot of the fans in Northern California are over the A's. Major League Baseball could certainly want two teams up into that geographical area. Would there be more to gain in terms of TV revenue if that was to happen? Like you have a ton of question marks on implementation there. So right now Salt Lake has so few question marks that if the nod were to be towards them, they know implementations right away. So that's where this becomes interesting, is we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. But let's just say tomorrow they said, that's it, we're expanding. I mean, Salt Lake would have to be the answer at this exact moment. We just have to see what happens between now and then. But I just love that instead of this pie in the sky, wouldn't it be cool? Hey, no, you have real vision there, real eyesight onto what's happening. And you just have to tip your hat to an ownership group that was able to see around a ton of corners, that was able to have their ear to the ground, to understand how things were starting to develop, to put things in motion. And by the way, they kept this hidden for about 2 years when they were starting to kind of game plan how they would want it all to unfold. So they deserve a ton of credit for putting themselves in the absolute best position possible. And yeah, they are the leader in the clubhouse.
And this is the part where I don't want to put you in a weird spot, but it's kind of just a weird spot. What would, if Salt Lake is awarded that team, what would that mean with a current minor league team, the Angels, and that dynamic where you have a partnership with an existing major league team, but now you're bringing in, tied ownership to another MLB team with a team in the same city? What would that look like, maybe at least from your perspective?
Yeah, so if you ended up, let's think, what would be the earliest an expansion would actually start playing, right? So when the Tampa Bay Rays and Colorado Rockies had their expansion, when that took place, it took about 4 or 5 years. I want to say it was 5 years from, hey, we're expanding, to the games were actually being played. Or I think the Tampa Bay Rays and Arizona Diamondbacks.
Right.
I think I called it. Yeah, that's what it was at the time. And I remember how many years went by before they actually played. Well, it would be similar in that way, because what you have to do, obviously, stadium build, there's a lot going on, minor league affiliate cities. In this situation, expansion is very different than just buying a team, because now you got to figure out, where your spring training facility is going to be. There's a lot that goes on. So in terms of having a minor league team in your backyard, well, if you look at it right now, I'm in Sugar Land, and the Astros have an affiliate right down the road right here. Gwinnett and Atlanta, Syracuse and the Mets. You could go all day long on the Round Rock and Arlington. Trying to think, Sacramento, San Francisco. They go on and on now, where you have a lot of proximity to the major league team. And so the vision clearly would likely be that that would be your AAA team, and enough years would go on that it would give the Angels plenty of time now to find a new AAA affiliate, and I don't know all the workings with that. My guess would be, if you look at the logic and the way, most Major League Baseball teams are working right now, they would love their AAA team to be there. And so great relationship with the Bees and the Angels. It's been great. We actually made our debut on Angels TV back on Sunday. It was great to have some of our Sunday games on in Southern California. So that was a lot of fun. I was down there last Monday getting a bunch of content and connecting so much with obviously players, but front office staff and different media talent, and was on their post-game shows. And the great conversation was about Salt Lake becoming a major league market. They're excited about the future of that. So as people say, well, what would happen with the Bees? I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that you would have plenty of time to figure out what to do for everybody in their AAA affiliation. It's not like it would be an instant decision that would need to be made. But my guess would be the ownership, the team that owns the Bees, that would then also own the major league team, would clearly have ownership of both and would want that to be the affiliation. That's just clearly looking at it from the way Major League and minor league baseball works out, and then also with the amount of time that would take place between the announcement of the expansion and then actual implementation of games being played.
Obviously getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
Just curious about how that would.
It's fun. I mean, that's the way it was with conference expansion, right? Like, it was constant. It was, okay, if Texas does this, what does that mean here? How does this shift this relationship? The nice part here is we're talking straightforward, right? I mean, it's clearly expansion. It's not like we have the entire NL West is going to go to a different league if, MLB makes a different decision. So conference expansion for football was just wild. This is just exciting because it means a new opportunity for something great in the state of Utah, and we're all chomping at the bit for positive news anytime it comes our way.
All right, TP. On the hoop side, Jazz off season has been fairly eventful. Of course, you bring in Darren Peterson, a highly rated draft pick. He looked really good in summer league. Of course, you still have Lowry Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr. You now get to see them in a position where their team is looking and trying to be competitive. What are your 30,000-foot expectations for this team? As I know it's still a few months out, but I'm sure some Jazz fans are getting really, really anxious and looking forward to tip-off of what should look quite a bit different, I think, from the last couple of years.
Yeah, I love what I watch from Peterson in Summer League because, look, he had plenty of moments that I thought he could take the play off, and nobody would have blamed him. Nobody would have blamed him. And instead, I saw a chase-down block that was an exorbitant amount of effort, energy, and the way he mentally processed the game, I thought he looked outstanding. His skill and talent's definitely there. But I thought his heart and hustle was on display constantly, not because he was trying to prove himself, but because he eats, sleeps, and breathes the game. And he has an unbelievable desire and drive to be great. And so one of the things that I always think about when a guy enters a locker room is, okay, you have expertise, but what kind of influence do you have? What kind of influence do you really have? Deshaun Stevenson was a nice talent. He had no influence. And then obviously he didn't play nearly as well as we thought. Ennis Cantor had some really nice things we thought as the number 3 pick, but at no point did I feel that this guy moved a locker room. I looked at a guy like Alec Burks, same kind of thing, right? Well, then I saw Donovan Mitchell, and I thought, all right, well, not only is this guy, a nice talent, I like the impact and the influence that he has on this entire locker room, and I think it makes a big difference. And he ended up being a tone setter, which I think changed everything. Now, in this situation here, I like his ability to have a great expertise, but also influence on that locker room, and I think he could be the tone setter. I mean, if you're the dude, like the number one thing I think about with Will Hardy now, and one of the challenges is you just went from one era of Jazz basketball into another where accountability is now at an uptick and defensive effort, energy, you're defining that differently now. Because it's one thing to say, hey, guys, we want to be a great defensive team. Here's what it takes. Now, I can't bench you because, well, it's not really what this is about right now. And so now all of a sudden something has to shift in terms of what standard is acceptable and what standard is not. And I get the feeling this guy is going to make sure that that standard cannot come down. And I think he's going to willingly take on a lot of some of those challenges that happen internally to pretty much say, yeah, I don't really care if that ends up hurting some of the inner feelings that go on around here. Here is the standard, and we're not backing down from that. And then you start to divide who really needs to be in a Jazz uniform and who doesn't. And I don't care if they've been here or not. I think something like that really changes a locker room. I saw Rudy Gobert do that, and I thought it was really interesting to see, which guys hated the new era of accountability and which guys were flourishing in it. And then all of a sudden, Quinn Snyder takes a locker room full of, Chris Johnson and Bryce Cotton and Elijah Millsap, and they go 16-8 in the last 24 games.
Right.
And it was awesome to see. You could just see a cultural shift. My big thing that I think we can see is massive cultural shift on what standard is acceptable and what standard is not. Now, in terms of wins, I don't know if it's 44. I don't know if it's 48. I don't know if it's 34 because maybe they start slower and, the schedule doesn't play their way. I'm not quite sure. And maybe they get into the play-in and they fight really hard and they don't quite make it to that, round of 8, if you will. But what I do think is this is going to be a massive year in terms of a step of that direction. There will be an uptick in wins, but the success to me all bears on what is the new standard, what is the new expectation, and what is that new culture like? Because not only do I think Peterson will do really well statistically and, wow the crowd and have some really great moments late in games, it's to shift everything about that locker room towards that standard. And I think the Jazz have the right head coach in place who has wanted that to happen. I thought the 6-year extension really showed that they believed he can do that when the time was right. But now the fun part about Jazz basketball, the one that maybe people don't want to talk about, is a guy like this steps in, a new expectation steps in, and then you have to start to identify the wrong people, and you got to get them off the bus, and you got to get them off the bus fast. Because that's how Urban Meyer did it, that's how Quinn Snyder did it, and that's how Will Hardy needs to do it.
I said on the inset that we'd wrap back around to your maize and blue. Have you gotten used to seeing Kyle Whittingham wearing that logo yet, or is it still really weird to you, like it is for me?
It kind of is weird. I think the one that keeps hitting me is when I see him in the press conferences talking the exact same way that I've watched him talk for the last 20-something years. And then, different Michigan friends of mine, even my bishop in Chicago is just over the moon about this whole thing. I mean, he cannot stop talking about it. And some of the things that Kyle will say, I'm like, yeah, it's just normal. That's Kyle. But in his world, this is brand new, fresh, phenomenal. We need this. And I agree with him. But it's fun because it still feels surreal that he's there and that Jay Hill is there. It's almost like if they said, hey, Ward Manuel needs some help here. Tony, how would you do this? It's exactly how I would have done it. So just on the personal angle, let alone my excitement for the program. No, and I think he's going to do great stuff, not just because he's Kyle and not just because I know him and not just because I'm connected really well with Jay Hill and all of that. These guys eat, sleep, and breathe game. And at Michigan, there's a highest standard and expectation, and they live that. I mean, they want that. They welcome that. And to look at Kyle and Jay Hill and that entire staff, their big thing is we want to win a national championship. And they're in a place with big expectations and the resources to do it. And what I like about them is they're not going to get outside of themselves. And what they do and did at Utah is very much a fit at the way it needs to be done at Michigan. I've said it 1,000 times. You don't need to be from Grand Rapids to be a Michigan man. And Kyle Whittingham, in my opinion, Jay Hill, those are guys that, in my opinion, exemplify what it means to be a Michigan man with that standard, that attitude. We don't become you, you become us. Like all the stuff that Kyle has ever said and that Ute fans have been used to hearing, I've always thought for such a long time he would be a terrific fit there. I just never believed it was realistic. And for it to become a reality, Porter, I mean, sure, is it bizarre or not? Yes. But it doesn't feel real because it, for me, feels too perfect. And so I'm excited. I'm excited about what they're going to do.
Well, and you mentioned a Michigan man. If it helps, Kyle lived on Michigan Ave in Salt Lake City for a good while before he was hired there.
I forgot all about that.
I had Zach Moss on.
He grew up kind of a fan as well. I didn't know this, but he actually grew up kind of a Michigan fan. Yeah.
More of a Schembechler guy, but yeah, he definitely followed him and cheered for him at Michigan. I had talked to him about that long before he was ever a candidate for the job. For me, it might never be not weird looking to me because you rewind to 1994, Tony. Kyle Whittingham was hired at the University of Utah about August of that year. 2 months later, I was born. So my entire lifespan up until December of this last year was with Kyle in Crimson and the Drum and Feathers. So it may never look normal to me, but we'll see what it looks like here in a month or so on the field. Before I get you out of here,
I'm amazed by it too. Last thing I'll leave you with on this is when he comes to the podium and he goes, "Okay, all right," and then he starts on the press conference. I'm like, dude, this is not real. And then, of course, he starts with a high decibel level at the beginning of his comment and then moves down to the whisper. Like that was always just something that it was a Kyle staple.
Yeah, the most difficult man in the world to mix radio for because his audio is so tough to match. Before I set you out of here, who is more suited to challenge Texas Tech in the Big 12? If it is Texas Tech in the Big 12, BYU or Utah? Of course, Kalani, the stalwart there, longtime coach, and now the Morgan Scalley era begins in earnest.
It's really, I'm going to go BYU, but I've said it from the beginning. I think Utah's going to have a great season. I absolutely believe they'll have a great season. I think I've picked them at 9-3. I think some of the concerns should be minimized, but I do think that first year you come in, there are just little things that come with being the first-time head coach. I don't think that Morgan will have some of the bumps and skids that Kyle Whittingham had or that Kalani Sitake had, right? But I do believe that there are just little things that can make the difference between, contending for a Big 12 title or being the next team on the looking in. And whatever those little things are that come with that first year, they're going to show up at some bizarre point under the surface, stuff we don't see. I've loved hearing coaches tell me stories in the past where they're like, I didn't even realize, it's something I know now, but at the time I didn't think of then. So I don't think Morgan's going to have these big black eye losses. I don't think he's going to have this weird 4-game losing streak or, have the equivalent of losing to UMass like, Kalani did or something like that. But we're talking about a big conference here with a lot of teams, and it's going to be really, really tough to win a conference like this. And so some of those little things can make a difference. So I think Utah's that next group on the outside looking in. But throughout the year, they'll be in contention for most of it. So I would pick BYU if you make me pick.
All right, TP, appreciate your time today. Enjoy your time down there in Texas, and we'll chat soon, hopefully in studio.
All right, yo. Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Tony Parks at 801 Tony Parks on Twitter, of course. The voice of the Bees come basketball season. You'll hear him on ESPN, ESPN Plus, and more, doing Big Sky and conference tournament stuff over there. Always appreciate his time. On the other side, Dave Fox of KUTV. We're talking sports right here on Utah's number one sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back. Drive Time on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. It is Utah's #1 sports talk. I am Porter Larsen, filling in for Spence Checketts on this Tuesday afternoon. A little bit off and on the rain out there, and weathering the storm to walk over here from his office. You drove?
Yeah.
From KUTV?
Because I'm heading out after.
Okay. Well,
So
we're
look at
talking
you
sports
getting
with
how
Dave Fox.
did you work this out? Yes, thank you. Great to be here. That you get to be in the big chair. Well, I'm actually sitting in the big chair, but all week. Well, Spence had you filling in for him the entire week.
Yeah, we'll Friday I'm going to bounce out of here as well.
So who does Friday?
Harry and whatever the national show is.
Okay.
We got the ESPN radio guys taking over on
I hope
Friday.
you get a bump in pay for having to do this.
Hey,
Pay.
I'll have you forward that up to my higher
Take
ups.
Spence's salary for the week.
I think I should do that.
Absolutely.
I think they should just forward it straight to me.
Well, we're dealing with it too over at the TV station because he and Dunny are out for talking RSL this week. So I got Adam Mikulich filling in with Jay Nolly.
Adam and Jay. Those are two. That's a good show.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we may not have Spence and Dunny back after that.
There you go.
And then Spence took the week off, so we've kind of duct tape his podcast together, which you'll hear tomorrow. So there you go. But yeah, hey, thanks for having me over here. This is probably the first time I've done this because normally if Spence is not here, I usually don't even come over.
You usually just don't text me back. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually just say, "Hey,
ignore
big
me."
man's gone." But I thought, well, if Spence is dumping, I know what it's like to have all that responsibility dumped on you.
Right.
Because it happens to me a lot. So I thought, I feel bad for Porter. I'm going to come and help him out for a half an hour.
Well, I appreciate you doing so.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll kind of hop all over the map a little bit. Almost. I got you for 15 minutes.
Oh, I thought it was 3 minutes. Okay, I didn't know that.
Let's only since we talked about it a little bit during the show.
Yeah.
With Tony Parks, who's a Michigan man, with Zach Moss, who was coached by Kyle. I want to rewind for you.
Okay.
1994. The fall of 1994, Kyle Whittingham, with a fine mustache, was hired by the University of Utah, made his way down from Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
And
he worked under his dad at the time.
About 2 months later, 2 months after that, Dave Fox, I was born.
What? You are a baby.
Do you remember your 1994 covering that situation? Take me back to
well, I don't remember
Kyle.
that. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Right, he was a defensive line
assistant.
assistant.
Just a defensive line. It didn't mean anything to us. It was cool. Oh, hey, that guy played at BYU. That's what's so weird about it. I mean, head coaches are big news.
Yep.
And we cover that like crazy. But when they start filling out, I mean, it's getting a little different now. The coordinator, everybody that Kyle took with him to Michigan, was every day it was another big story. And then Scally having to replace those people and things like that, and Kalani. But back then, you rarely. I mean, assistant coaches came and went. There'd probably be times when you'd go a season or two and you didn't even know who, that guy's on the staff. You know, they just.
We sent out a tweet. Whatever.
They didn't even have tweets then.
Of course.
94? Come on, Porter. Now you're starting. They didn't have, there was no Facebook.
You sent a fax.
Seriously, there was email. But no, we didn't. I think back to then, and it's more something that we look back on now because Fred Whittingham was the defensive coordinator for the Utes for a time, and his son coming on board. But it wasn't. It was you. If you that day would have said, "Oh, by the way, this little guy we just hired out of Idaho is one day going to be Michigan's head coach after he does a couple of decades at Utah," you would have thought, "Oh, you're psycho." But it certainly worked out.
Yeah, pretty crazy to put it in that time. When I look at it, because every time I see him, whether it's camp coming up or a press conference or an interview or Michigan socials putting him out there, it just looks so weird to me. Yeah. Because I never saw him in BYU blue. I've only seen him in my entire living life donning the crimson red and the drum and feather. So I don't know. He may spend 2-3 years at Michigan, and it still will look a little odd to me, I think. But we move on.
But what a great opportunity for him. And talk about falling up. I mean, that is the ultimate.
It's the job in college football.
Absolutely.
So
and the assistants that he took with him was a no-brainer for all of them as well. I mean, think about it. Jay Hill could be the head coach at Michigan in a few years.
Right.
You never know.
It's how you move into those positions. You win a bunch, and then hopefully the timing works in your favor.
When you find a program that's a complete train wrek that needs to speak, I'm not talking about on the field because it's a good team
right.
on the field.
When I talk about timing, even that, like it's sometimes not even luck. It's sometimes just circumstance. Yeah. Like your head coach going a little crazy and
right. If that never happens, who knows what Kyle's doing? He's probably just in retirement.
Dave, we do move on now, though. The Morgan Scalley era begins in earnest in about a week.
Next
Camp Morgan, Camp Scalley, whatever you want to call it. We'll be up there doing interviews and whatnot. One thing that to me was kind of striking was, although these are two guys with very different personalities and personas, and when you talk to them, it's very different, Kyle and Morgan.
And yet a lot of it's the same.
And yet the email I got about fall camp and the procedures and practices was copy and pasted.
I know. When I read that, I thought, hey, I thought we were going to have a new era here. What is literally the same thing? If it, maybe a little worse. I mean, just absolutely the same thing. Practice is closed. These are the dates when you could interview people. I think there were fewer of them, to be honest with you. I'm not actually, I'd have to add them all up. No, I think there really were. Exactly the same. Scalley and the offense available on Monday, defense available on Tuesday, coaches, assistant coaches on. I mean, it's virtually the same thing. Meet outside the practice area. I thought the exact same thing when I read that email the other day. I just kind of started laughing to myself, and because when the change first started to happen, we all kept hearing that there'll be a different vibe, a little bit more of an open vibe. Nope, not one bit.
Well, and I will say. Morgan and I think you were there in the auditorium when Morgan brought us in.
The private thing.
Showed us his process, his film study, and kind of how he goes about things. That was an olive branch to us, saying, "Hey, I want you to know that I'm going to try, but come football time, I'm also going to do exactly what Kyle did in that regard."
And he didn't say that, but you're right.
I don't blame him.
That day, I kind of thought the same thing. I thought, oh, this really is going to be a different era. Things are going to be a little more open. And then there was that moment. There was that. I don't remember how. I had to leave early because of an assignment. I don't know how long you were there. Was it a couple hours we were in the auditorium? We had lunch first. And now it's right back to,
And I appreciated
same
that,
old thing.
Introducing us to some of the new assistants and the new faces. But, it's striking to me how very different they are as fellas and how similar we may see them as football coaches.
It's funny. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a lot of paranoia, and they don't want anybody to see anything. And
well, in this age of football, and of course Michigan is part of this conversation, intel is a big deal, right? Like what you know about the team across from you. Some people kind of dismiss it. It's not a huge advantage. It doesn't really matter. If
you're good enough, it shouldn't matter.
And in a game of inches, it does matter, right? And football is sometimes a game of inches.
Is that why Michigan was videoing practices?
Of course. Intel is half the game, right?
Yeah.
I go back to a situation a couple of years ago when the Cam Rising in or out thing was.
Oh, yeah.
And Kyle was, although a little prickly about it, a little frustrated by it, he was also using it to throw smoke for the opponents. And I go back to the game against UCLA at home. Cam had not been cleared to practice or play at that point. He was not going to take the field. He was not going to play. But UCLA didn't know that at that point. Neither did we. We were all like, what the hell's going on? Utah and Kyle decided, hey, Cam, go throw that uniform on. And Cam came out, started taking snaps before the game.
Well, he did that in a lot of games, but yeah.
But this UCLA one was before we kind of got the story, right? We were. And I watched the UCLA coaching staff all turn around, see Cam taking snaps, and then go and shuffle some papers and switch up what they were doing in the defensive pregame. And if that gave Kyle 1 inch of an advantage in the pregame, he would have taken it and he would have said it was worth it. And that's how college football coaches operate. That's how football coaches in general operate. And I don't really blame them. Like,
I don't know. I think
as
you
a
could
media
go too
guy,
far, though. I'm not 100% behind you on that. I remember the game at Washington State a couple of years ago when the announcers in the booth didn't even know who was playing quarterback. I think they assumed it was Cam.
They did, but also,
and they were livid on the air.
They also didn't show up.
That's true.
When
it
Utah
was a remote.
offered
They
them
call
a
it
meeting.
a Remy broadcast.
Yeah.
Well, no, they weren't at the stadium for the broadcast. They were on remote.
And they
missed
the pre-broadcast meeting with the coaching staff. So
they could have been alerted, and they weren't.
There's levels to this, but Dave, if we're not doing this thing, if we're coaches, do you think that we?
Oh, probably.
Do you think we're going to care much about like how much info Spence and I have?
Obviously, we are. I mean. I remember I used
tough.
to do play-by-play for the Utes on Channel 2 back before ESPN, okay? And so I'm the guy calling the games. And in the basketball team, Rick Majerus, I would go to their practices a lot. And I'll never forget this, where the practice we're at Texas. And this is like the day before the game, and we're all sitting there, and I'm just making a couple notes for my broadcast. And Majerus glances over, and this is probably the 30th or 40th practice I've been at with him, right? This has been going on for years. And he sees me write down, and he says, "Put that pencil down. I don't want you writing stuff down and giving it to our opponent." I'm like, "Coach, whatever." And obviously I did. There was a practice I was at, and it was in Hawaii, and I had David James with me because he was filling in, and McJarris didn't recognize him for some reason, and he just threw us out. And I'm like, I'm calling your game tomorrow night on our air.
Yeah.
So there's a level of paranoia amongst coaches everywhere.
And, of course, yes, it probably does sometimes go overboard. But at the same time, when you are dealing with 18, sometimes 17, 19-year-olds, distractions they can be big time. If you get a distraction midweek because someone tells their cousin something, and then that gets up through the woodworks, that could be tough for a coach who's trying to keep everything tight to the vest. And I get it.
But circling back to where you started with this, it's virtually the same thing, unchanged with the policies of Utah football practice.
Now, speaking of fall camp.
By the way, speaking of fall camp, Eric Kerr's era began today. Did you even know that?
This is true.
How about that?
I did know that.
Of all the storylines, Whittingham at Michigan, the Scally era, I'm really curious to see how he does at Weber, because so rare does a guy go from college or high school to college. And I'm curious to see how that works out. That could be tough. That happened at UNLV several years ago. They hired the coach from Bishop Gorman because he was killing it, and he failed miserably, and they ended up firing him. So I hope Eric does well.
I do as well, and I'm interested to see that. It's super rare,
really rare
to get that opportunity. What's also super rare is a high school coach putting more quarterbacks into the NFL than Division I college coaches are, right? So
isn't that crazy?
The guy is clearly doing something right in that regard, a quarterback whisperer of some kind.
Well, and he's got – you talk about quarterbacks. He had Devin Brown.
Yep.
And Brown goes to Ohio State, doesn't play. Transfers to Cal, doesn't play. And now he's reunited with Kerr at Weber State.
That will be interesting.
That'll be very interesting to see how that works
He's
out.
got the potential to light up that conference at that level. So we'll see there.
But I didn't mean to take you off BYU and Utah. I know that's the big story around here. But that is today. We were up there today, and I'm excited for Eric to see how he does. They get to open camp earlier because they opened the season earlier.
Right. Yeah, we'll be paying attention to that as well and those storylines. But, yeah, with Utah fall camp less than a week away, what is your biggest question mark going in? We got a month before football actually begins.
You know what?
But
I keep hearing things like position groups. Offensive, defensive line. How will they do? Offensive skill guys look like they're going to be fine. You still have Sharif Shaw yelling at the defensive secondary. All that. But at the end of the day, for me, it's really about how Scally handles the entire program as a head coach. He's never been a head coach,
right?
And that can be a tough thing. We've seen this a lot. Coaches that are, head coaches leave programs usually for two reasons. One, because the program's really good or it's really bad. And in some respects, it's almost easier to take over if it was really bad you got nowhere else to go. But this program has been so good for so many years. I'm just curious to see how Scally handles it. And I'm talking about everything in the game. How does he handle 4th and 1? How many times does he go for it? Just little decisions that are going to be made throughout the game. That's what I'm curious to see more than anything else. The position groups, I get it. You got a new offensive line coach. How is he going to deal with them? You got a new offensive coordinator.
That to me is the biggest question mark.
That is a big
Jordan
question
Gross
mark
and his unit.
But I mean, these guys have all coached. Although the Grossers, another example of guys that spend so much time in high school. And but at the end of the day, I want to see how Morgan Scally manages everything: the players, the coaches, the schedule. We already know how he's going to manage practice. The game time decisions, things like that. Defensive coordinator is a big deal, too, because it's been him for so long. So, to me, the number one storyline is Morgan Scally and how he handles this new role.
And for me, it is what delineates him from the program of the last 30 years, right? Like, yes, it's looking similar. It's going to have shades of what we saw from Kyle Whittingham and what he learned from Kyle Whittingham. But where does he leave his own mark on this program?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And if he does, is that a net positive, a net negative? Where does that go? Because ultimately, we talked about how on paper it's looking very similar, but from a persona standpoint, from just a personability standpoint, they are very different people.
Yeah, totally.
That's going to come out in some form. It's going to show in some form on the field as the season rolls along, and I'm curious to
it may not
learn
show
where.
in game one.
Right.
Because, you look at the opening games for Utah, Utah State, and BYU, and it's Idaho, Idaho State, and Utah Tech. No offense to Utah Tech. I think they're going to be fine in their own league. But those are 3 walkovers
right
for all those opponents. So I don't know how much we're going to learn out of even Morgan and his group in that opening game. But, then it gets kind of interesting. Anytime you got a coach against Bronco Mendenhall, you never know. Arkansas, on and on it goes, and then you get right into league. So as the league moves along, you read all these articles about how, by the time they play BYU, both teams could be undefeated. That's looking at the schedule, that seems normal on paper, but that's a tall order to start talking that way.
Let's chat in September.
Before let's get a few games under their belt first, and we'll see.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you coming in for a moment.
Bet.
Appreciate your time as always.
Of course. I'm happy to help out since Spence has dumped this on you unceremoniously and then left town.
I quite enjoyed only having to deal with you.
I've never sat in his chair. This is kind of cool, so thank you.
You know what to do with any of those buttons? Don't start pressing them.
No. They have sliders on them.
That's your just mess with the board. Go ahead.
I was a radio DJ back in the day, but I don't remember exactly how it all works.
All right, DJ Brad Thomas.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Steve.
thanks.
We're back on the other side. Wrap things up and turn it over to today's best. It is The Drive. No Spence Checketts. I'm Porter Larsen filling in on a Tuesday on Utah's number one sports talk. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. That'll do it for a Tuesday edition of The Drive here on ESPN 792.1 FM. I am Porter Larsen, filling in for Spence the majority of this week. We'll give you some ESPN radio national programming on a Friday, but it will be me here until then. Of course, as we did today, we'll do a bunch of Utah fall camp previews. We'll talk Jazz and NBA offseason, some NFL storylines, some baseball, some soccer, whatever pops up in the golf world, and more will all come your way on the program over the next couple of days. A big thanks to our guest today. Of course, Trey Fitzgerald of Real Salt Lake, talking some RSL, some Royals, and of course a little World Cup. And hey, we talked a little NBA with Trey as well. Zach Moss, the top running back in all the record books at the University of Utah, joining us in studio. He was our bell cow for the day, an entire hour sitting there in the air chair. Tony Parks, talking bees, talking baseball, and MLB potential here in Salt Lake City. And then, of course, talking sports with our guy Dave Fox. You could see him each and every night on the television side, about 10:35, depending on the programming. Still to come on today's best this afternoon, Gordy Chiesa, Chad Jensen talking some Broncos and NFL offseason. You'll hear from Brett Ciancia of Pick Six Previews, the most accurate previewer of college football out there in the last couple of years, if you pay attention to those numbers. You'll hear from all of those guys still to come. And if you missed my interview with Zach Moss, you'll get it about 6 o'clock here on the station. We'll replay that for you before turning it over to ESPN Radio. Tomorrow's show will be a fun one. It'll be me, again, here in the air chair, and I'll be joined by the voice of the Jazz. Buckle up, friends. It's Craig Bolerjack stopping by on a Wednesday. Of course, we will talk plenty of off-season basketball and more, but we'll get to some other stuff with Bowler as well, of course, on the program. Thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in and listening today, whether it was up on the AM side, the FM side, the YouTube channel, ESPN 700 mobile app. However you listen, I certainly appreciate your time, your ear, and your energy. I hope it was a good afternoon, and hopefully you join us back here on a Wednesday as we get you set and send you halfway through your work week. This was The Drive. No Spence Checketts. He'll be back for you on a Monday edition. But until then, it is me, Porter Larsen, right here on Utah's #1 sports talk. It is ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.